Bennett, and you know what else people can't stop talking about?
What's that?
Our boy Daniel Merriman. His coverage of the Dukes hoops. We're bringing him on today on this Wednesday to chat some conference preview action. We'll go men's basketball, we'll go women's basketball. But Daniel, how are you doing this post-Christmas heading into New Year's season?
I am doing fantastic, Jack, and thank you both for having me on today. Very excited to talk some Dukes hoops.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're excited to have you. We had you covering the Coppin State game. Pretty exciting matchup there.
Exhilarating.
For the Dukes. We've also gone to a number of games just as a fan. So you've seen the team live and in person, which you can always pick up some good tidbits for that. So they're 12-0. I think most fans are familiar that they're still undefeated, right?
Nation's longest win streak as well with 12.
Pretty good. One of
Yes.
3 remaining unbeatens. What are some of the big takeaways, Daniel, from a 12-0 start that included some tough ones to start, and then I guess some easier matchups here the last couple weeks?
Some takeaways would be high octane offense. This team, I believe, is still leading the country in points per game and doing it at a pretty efficient clip. They're shooting the 3-ball fairly well at about 37%, almost 50% from the field, and that free throw percentage is up north of 70 now. You never see college teams have that type of efficiency at the volume that they're scoring at. So the ball movement has been excellent. They're winning their turnover margin. Defense has looked scattershot but improved, and they have so much depth. I mean, you can roll out a legitimate full bench unit with this team, and there's very, very little drop off, especially at the forward and point guard spot. I think Jalen Carey is going to get a whole lot of minutes over this upcoming Sun Belt Conference play, and I would not be surprised if Bickerstaff has to take a game or two out and Carey gets moved into that starting lineup and plays flawlessly. I mean, they've really across the board looked incredibly deep, and Byington's coaching his tail off. He's been doing very, very well with this roster.
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, I've been impressed. I was just going to say that I was going into the year, Jack. I kept making those comments that like they weren't going to be able to shoot the 3, and they were a small ball team. They couldn't shoot. Everyone on the roster who's taken at least 10 threes is making 33% or more from deep, which is just very impressive when they play as many players as Daniel had mentioned.
Well, saying that. Go ahead, Daniel.
And the fact that they have 2 guys north of 65% shooting from the floor, just in general, and Jalen Carey and TJ Bickerstaff. Jalen Carey's at like 70% from the field, I believe, at the moment. That inside-out punch is unheard of at the mid-major level. To have that interior presence is really something special that I think is going to give this team the ability to win a lot of games. Down honestly, they probably shouldn't because they're shooting themselves out of it.
Yeah, and you hit on Jalen Carey and Mark Byington. He heard what Bennett was saying. They're a small ball team that can't shoot. And then I guess he heard what I was saying, and he saw some of our group chat names where the entire offseason it was the Dukes need bigs. I can't believe we didn't beef up in the middle. I can't believe our all of this stuff. And Jalen Carey has just casually been one of, if not the front runner to win newcomer of the year in the Sun Belt. I mean, what Jalen Carey has done in this non-conference stretch has been nothing short of magnificent. It'll be really interesting to see how he then continues to develop into conference play. Was he one of those guys that got a lot of minutes because they were in non-con and they're playing the Morgan States and the Coppin States of the world? And now that they're playing, granted, the Sun Belt isn't much better than that with the Texas States and Georgia Southerns of the world. But it'd be really interesting to see how he continues his growth this season, his freshman year, as we head into conference play. But I want to pick your brain, Daniel, here of this non-conference slate. I mean, it started with a win against Michigan State, a miraculous win against Kent State. What was it? Southern of just an absolute beatdown. Fresno State, I think it was. I kind of get lost in the beginning of it because it was all a blur, because then we had nothing for the last month and a half, it feels like, maybe just month. How has student involvement kind of gone with this team? Has it ebbed and flowed, or have the students been really into it from the jump? And even though it's been Coppin State, they don't really mind.
I think for the most part, the students have been incredibly tuned into this team. I think with football season every year, there comes a majority focus on that because JMU's had the historical success there and has provided plenty of winning teams over the past 2 decades. But this basketball team has been something special, and people recognize that and want to watch them play, whether it be through a TV screen on an away game, showing up to the AUBC, even during weekday games. I mean, it's really been impressive to see the student support and turnaround. I do think that with finals and with the Christmas break, there has been a bit of a dip in home attendance, but that's kind of everywhere, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. You
Yeah.
don't have the luxury of saying, "Hey, let me go out to a Thursday night game when I have 3 tests the next week." Like, you have different priorities in that
Yeah.
essence, but I think come conference schedules and come the start of the next semester, there's going to be a pretty healthy, I'd say average over probably 4,500 people at every game, and a good 75% of that is students. The end zones, quote unquote, along the baselines have been packed pretty much every game that people have been in Harrisonburg for, and that's been awesome to see. Even dating back to last year, I mean, you look at
Yeah.
that Marshall game at the very end of conference schedule before they went off to the conference championship down in Florida. That game was electric. Didn't help that we lost, but it was a great atmosphere and people were really into it.
Do you when's the date, I guess, that students come back? So are they missing out on a couple of big ones here? When do you return to school?
Yes, students come back January 16th, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day. A lot of upperclassmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, they will be back a little bit earlier than that to get their off-campus housing stuff settled and things like that. But most freshmen are only allowed to come back. I think it's either that Sunday or that Monday, which means that you'll miss out on the App State game on the 13th, which is a shame.
Was it going to say that's the one? I don't know about you guys, but at least in the near future, that's the game that I've kind of got circled.
Yeah.
And there are not a lot of circles on my calendar for the remaining
There's
basketball
2 for me.
season.
There are 2 circles for me, and they are both App State.
Yeah.
I think I have 4 circled. I have
Oh,
Ooh.
whoa!
App,
Negative
Louisiana,
Nancy.
App again, and then that home MAC challenge game.
Those are good circles.
Those are fine.
That's
Yeah,
a 4. Those are kind of four good ones to pinpoint. Yeah, I think the Louisiana one's maybe going
A little under the radar.
Yeah, they're playing decent basketball. That's their game on January 4th. So they've got one game between that, and it's a road game, which makes it a little tougher. So that could be, if you're trying to circle somewhere, maybe the undefeated season ends. That's certainly one in the near future.
Do you guys want to know a fun fact about
Go
this
for it.
whole winter break time? This whole winter break time, you might want to circle every single game played during this winter break stretch, because last year during winter break, which was December 17th to January 15th, I did some digging and I found last year's academic calendar from the registrar's website. The JMU went 4-4 in those 8 games they played over winter break, including the Coppin State loss, including a 2-2 mark at home. So it'll be really interesting to see how it all plays into it. And that brings me into this next point where they're taking on a Texas State team here on Saturday in this doubleheader where there's all of this hype going into conference play, and then they're going to be in an uncharacteristically empty AUBC. I mean, it is going to be, they're going to have to create their own atmosphere, it seems like, heading into this game, much like JMU football had to do with Georgia State earlier this year.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a bit of pressure from Mark Byington on this team, because every time I've talked to him in post-game pressers, he's stressed the fact that this team is deep because they have to be deep. He's been saying this throughout the entire year, that if we are not sharp 1 through 10 through conference play, we will get stood up by somebody that we probably shouldn't. There
Yeah.
is always those games, especially in a marathon that is a college basketball season with those 30 plus games, where you can slip. You can have a bad shooting night. You can have a really bad turnover margin game that just it can flip itself on its head. And if you don't show up and show out 1 through 10, you're not gonna have the result you want. So I think the non-conference experience of getting to play a ton of guys, and while I think the rotation will be a little bit shortened, I would be comfortable throwing Xavier Brown, Raekwon Horton, I mean, Quincy Allen when he's back, because it looks like he's a little bit banged up at the moment. Jalen Carey, like that whole 4, I wouldn't have a problem running against any Sunbelt starting 5 right now. And that says a lot about how he's recruited and how he absolutely killed this transfer portal class.
Yeah, it's a pretty good class. They've been running with going on KenPom, I'm looking at their lineups. Michael Green, Noah Friedel, Terrence Edwards, Julian Wooden, TJ Bickerstaff a lot. Pretty good 5. That's an impressive starting group. I think for me, at least, I don't know about you, Daniel, but I've been pretty surprised by just how impactful Michael Green has been. I sort of
Hey, my
slotted him in.
guy, my
I thought he
guy.
thought he'd be the starting point guard. Did not anticipate him sort of lighting it up from three and being able to create his own shot as much as he can, which I think has been really impressive to me.
I think Byington said it best when talking about Mike Green, saying that you never really want to judge a player on one stop or one season because in his previous two stops, he did much different things. I believe at Robert Morris, he was a bit more of a scorer and really could light it up from distance and average something north of like 12 points a game. But then you go to Bryant, and he's a 7+ assist guy with minus like less than 2 turnovers. So to have that multifaceted approach to the offensive game of being able to distribute, being able to create your own shot. And now that he's shooting absolutely lights out from deep, it opens up so many passing lanes for him to be able to feed his bigs, to be able to get open shots to Julian Wood and find Terrence Edwards on cuts. I mean, this team has had really good off-ball movement, which helps to getting your man open, but he's taken that opportunity and run with it in terms of the starting point guard job. He's one of their biggest X factors going into March of how successful they can be is on his shoulders.
Now looking into Sunbelt play, we've hyped up this team so much. What is the percentage chance that they do go undefeated?
Now we're talking football numbers here, Jack. Undefeated is very hard to do in basketball. At any
I know.
level, at
Give me a
any
percentage, Dan.
major.
Give me don't dance around there. Give me a percentage.
I'll give you 7%.
Okay, Bennett.
Ken Palm's got it at 2.5%. I'll go a little higher just because I think some of the spreads where they have them like an underdog to app on the road and stuff surprised me a little bit. So I'll say like 5%.
Okay, that's fair. I'm saying like 100, but I appreciate your guys' lack of trust in this team. No, I think JMU. I don't know if this is a hot take. I think they'll finish this regular season with 3 losses.
That seems to be the number. Bennett, you circled it as well. 3 is their bubble if they can get an at-large bid or not to the NCAA tournament.
So you guys think, or I guess Bennett, 3 losses is the at-large, you think?
That would be like maxing out, I think.
But and it would have to be right losses. App State on the road, MAC challenge, if it's a good MAC team, which it looks like it will be. And then like what? App at home.
And then the flip side of that, though, is if you're losing your quality games, that you do. I don't know like how the committee exactly would view it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
then,
honestly, I'd almost prefer like a fluke loss in there.
Yeah.
Like you take like a 25-point L in the ear to like Georgia Southern or something like that. Like
where
I
you
would
shoot
much
like
rather
5%.
actually wait, Georgia Southern just lost to a D2 team earlier this year, so maybe not them. But if they take like a really bad loss to a pretty poor Sunbelt team, I think that can almost get like kind of smoothed over as an outlier, and people are like, man, they had an injury or someone caught COVID, something like that. So I think that 2 to 3 losses, you still have an excellent case. Again, depending upon losses to make an at-large bid, but anywhere of 4, 5, 6, you're looking at you have to win the conference tournament or have something extraneously crazy happen because the Sun Belt is not a good league this year.
Yeah, it is. It's not good. So I don't know where I was going with that. It is not a good conference.
It kind of seems at large, though. Like going into the year, I was telling people that even saying at large was like the dumbest thing you could do right before the.
I'm pretty sure we were on this podcast saying even if we go undefeated, we're not getting an at large.
Yeah, that was maybe a little hyperbole for some of that, but we were talking about how like they're not going to go undefeated and they would have to go very close to undefeated.
Yeah,
it kind of feels like the way they're positioned and how bad the Sun Belt looks. I kind of feel like they're going to be in the at-large conversation. Like it'd be a little disappointing for me if they do take 4 or more conference losses. Am I a little bit too excited there?
Are they this year's FAU? Is that hyperbole to say? Like, are they this year's FAU?
No, but in a different way. And the reason I say that is because FAU had a fantastic defensive starting 5 last year. Like they could clamp up anyone from a Power 5 level.
Yeah.
And I have not seen that from JMU yet. Don't get me wrong, their defensive efforts have been valiant and they're definitely improving, but you have to have like lockdown defense to be able to even squeak at running that to the Final Four at this mid-major level. So I I could see it because they are so incredibly like potent offensively. Like it's possible, but anything past a Sweet 16 run, I think we're a little bit pipe dreaming there.
Okay. All right. Fair. All right. All right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
a little bit of a realist take, but
to add a little bit to that, last year at the end of the season, Florida Atlantic, they were 22nd offensively in KenPom nationally, 34th defensively. JMU right now is 37th offensively and 115th defensively. So there's definitely a bit of a drop off there when you look at the defense.
Okay, I retract my statement. But more so, what I was let me rephrase that question then, though. Can they be that team at the end of the season at the mid-major level with 1 or 2 losses that is kind of the nation's darling, which is kind of how I saw FAU last year? Am I wrong with thinking that kind of similarity?
yeah, I think that could be stated. It's really tough because again, the Sun Belt has a lot of notoriety in football and almost none in when it comes to basketball.
Yeah.
So to even get some type of national coverage for this team, I mean, it takes a signature win like Michigan State, but they don't look particularly great in the Big Ten. Don't get me wrong, they just beat the absolute crap out of Baylor, who is a top 10 team, and they very well could turn it around. MSU always looks like a really good team come March. But
January, February, Izzo, April.
yeah, basically. But to have that type of notoriety, you just need to have a better schedule. You need to have more notable names there, and you need to have just frankly a really good team. And I think JMU checks off that box of having a really good team, but I don't know if the other factors would line up into them becoming a nation's darling. I could see them being an extremely good mid-major team that gets a lot of traction in bracketology of people saying, oh, this is like a 10-7 matchup. Pick them. Like I can see that, but in terms of nation's darling, I don't think we're getting there quite yet.
They give me some Charleston vibes from last year, more than FAU.
Okay.
Yeah, like they
That's fair.
remind me in some odd way of like those Drake teams that you always see as like a number 7 seed, and you're like, really? Okay. And then
Yeah.
they win 2 games in the tournament. You're like, that tracks. Like that
Makes sense.
kind of it kind of reminds me of that, of where you're like, I guess they're having a really good year, but it looks like this could hopefully, if Byington stays around, be a consistent theme in JMU basketball.
Big if on if Byington stays, because there's probably Power 5 teams looking at him right now, kind of